This is something that happened to me about 6 months ago, and honestly, I still get chills thinking about it. I work in this massive downtown office building, one of those old corporate towers that's been around since the 70s. 23 floors of cubicles, conference rooms, and that weird corporate smell that every office building seems to have. I'd been working there for almost 2 years, so I knew that building like the back of my hand. Every floor, every hallway, every squeaky door. Or at least I thought I did. It was a typical Tuesday evening in November. Most people had already cleared out for the day, but I was stuck late finishing up a project that my boss needed first thing Wednesday morning. You know how it is. One of those deadlines that somehow sneaks up on you even though you've known about it for weeks. The office was pretty much empty except for the cleaning crew and maybe 1 or 2 other people scattered throughout the building. I finally wrapped everything up around 8:30 and packed my stuff to head home. My car was parked in the underground garage, so I needed to take the elevator down to the basement level. Nothing unusual about that. I'd done it hundreds of times before. I walked over to the elevator bank, pressed the down button, and waited. The building has 4 elevators, but only 2 of them were working that night. One was stuck on the 15th floor with an out-of-order sign taped to it. The elevator that came down was the one on the far left, Elevator C. The doors opened with that familiar ding, and I stepped inside. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a building that old. Faded bronze walls, fluorescent lighting that flickered slightly, and carpet that had seen better days. The button panel was right where it always was, with all the familiar numbers. Basement, floors 1 through 23, and the mechanical room access that required a key. I pressed B for basement and watched the doors close. The elevator started moving down just like it always did. Floor 22, 21, 20, 19. Everything was completely normal. I was checking my phone, scrolling through some messages, not really paying attention. Just another routine trip down to the parking garage. But then something weird happened. The elevator didn't stop at the first floor like it usually did when it was going to the basement. It just kept going down, and going down, and going down. I looked up from my phone and watched the floor indicator. It had passed the first floor, past the basement level, and was showing numbers I'd never seen before. -2, -3, -4. I thought maybe there were sub-basement levels I didn't know about. Some buildings have multiple basement floors for storage or utilities. But I'd been working in this building for 2 years, and I'd never heard anyone mention anything below the main basement level. Plus, there weren't any buttons for negative floors on the panel. Just the regular basement button that I'd pressed. The elevator finally stopped, and I heard that same familiar ding. But when the doors opened, I wasn't looking at the parking garage I knew so well. Instead, I was staring down a hallway that looked nothing like any part of the building I'd ever seen before. The walls were this sterile white color, almost hospital-like, with fluorescent lights that were way brighter than anything upstairs. The floor was polished concrete instead of the worn carpeting throughout the rest of the building, and it was dead silent. Not the usual hum of air conditioning or distant traffic sounds you could always hear in the parking garage. Just complete, absolute silence. I stood there for a moment trying to figure out what was going on. Maybe I'd gotten confused about which elevator I'd taken. Maybe this was some kind of service level that I'd never accessed before. But the button panel inside the elevator still showed all the same floors, and I was sure I'd only pressed the basement button. I stepped out of the elevator to get a better look around. The hallway stretched in both directions with doors spaced evenly along the walls. Each door had a small rectangular window like you'd see in a classroom or office, but they were all dark inside. No nameplates, no numbers, no signs indicating what any of the rooms were for. The strangest part was how new everything looked. The building upstairs showed its age, scuffed walls, worn fixtures, that general tired feeling of a place that's been used hard for decades. But down here, everything was pristine, like it had just been built yesterday. I walked a little ways down the hallway to my left, peering through the windows of the doors I passed. Most of the rooms were empty, just blank spaces with the same white walls and concrete floors. But as I got further from the elevator, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. One room had what looked like a conference table, but it was way too big for the space. Like the table took up almost the entire room, and there was barely space to walk around it. Another room had filing cabinets lining every wall from floor to ceiling, but they all looked brand new and completely empty. The whole place felt wrong somehow. Not dangerous exactly, but just off in a way that made my skin crawl. It was too clean, too quiet, too perfect. And I still couldn't figure out how I'd gotten here or where exactly here even was. I decided to head back to the elevator and try to get back to familiar territory. But when I turned around, I realized I'd walked further than I thought. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever in both directions, and I couldn't see the elevator anymore. That's when I started to panic a little bit. I walked back the way I'd come, but the hallway just kept going. Door after door, all identical, all dark inside. No elevator bank anywhere in sight. It was like the hallway had somehow gotten longer while I wasn't paying attention. I tried the handles on a few of the doors, thinking maybe I could find another way out or at least figure out what this place was supposed to be. But every single one was locked. Not just locked. They felt solid, like they weren't meant to be opened at all. The silence was starting to get to me. My footsteps echoed weirdly in the empty hallway, and I found myself walking more quietly without really meaning to. It felt like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd just taken the elevator down to the parking garage like I always did. I kept walking, looking for any sign of the elevator or another way out. The hallway curved slightly to the right and I followed it, hoping it would lead me back to where I'd started. But around the curve, things got even stranger. The doors here were different. Instead of the small rectangular windows, they had circular portholes like you'd see on a ship. And through these windows, I could see that the rooms weren't empty. There was furniture in them, but not office furniture. It looked more like living spaces, beds, dressers, even what looked like small kitchenettes. But here's the thing that really freaked me out. Some of the rooms looked like they were being used. The beds were made, but not perfectly. There were personal items on the dressers, coffee cups sitting on tables. Like people had been there recently but had just stepped out for a moment. I pressed my face against one of the portholes to get a better look. And that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a jacket hanging on the back of a chair. A jacket I recognized because I'd seen it every day for the past 2 years. It belonged to Sarah from accounting, 2 floors up from my department. The same navy blue blazer with the small coffee stain near the left pocket that she'd been trying to get out for months. I stumbled backwards from the door, my heart racing. What was Sarah's jacket doing in some weird underground room that shouldn't even exist? Had she been down here too? Was she still down here somewhere? I started moving faster down the hallway, checking more windows as I went. In another room, I saw a coffee mug that I swear belonged to Mike from IT. The same stupid mug with the faded logo from some tech conference he'd attended years ago. And in the room next to that, a pair of reading glasses that looked exactly like the ones my supervisor Janet always wore. None of this made any sense. These were people I worked with every day, people who took the same elevators I did, who parked in the same garage. But their personal belongings were scattered throughout these impossible rooms in a place that couldn't possibly exist. I was practically running now, desperately looking for any way out of this nightmare. The hallway kept curving, leading me past more and more rooms filled with familiar objects. A lunchbox I'd seen in the break room refrigerator. A umbrella that someone always left by the security desk. A sweater that hung on the back of a chair in the marketing department. It was like someone had been collecting pieces of the lives of everyone who worked in the building above. But why? And how long had this been going on? The worst part was the silence. Despite all these signs that people had been here, there wasn't a single sound anywhere. No voices, no footsteps, no mechanical hums. Just my own panicked breathing echoing off the pristine white walls. Then I heard it, the faint ding of an elevator. I froze, listening carefully. There it was again, coming from somewhere ahead of me. I followed the sound, moving as quietly as I could. The hallway curved one more time, and finally, I saw it. The same elevator I'd taken down here, sitting exactly where I'd left it. The doors were open and the familiar fluorescent light spilled out into the hallway. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward that elevator like my life depended on it, diving through the doors just as they started to close. I hammered the button for the first floor, then the basement, then basically every button on the panel. I just wanted to get out of there and back to somewhere that made sense. The elevator lurched upward and I watched the floor indicator climb. -4, -3, -2, then suddenly it jumped to B for basement, skipping right over the negative floors like they'd never existed in the first place. The doors opened, and I was looking at the familiar concrete walls and fluorescent lighting of the parking garage. My car was sitting exactly where I'd left it, under the same burned-out light fixture I'd been meaning to report to building maintenance for weeks. Everything was normal again. I got in my car and sat there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Had I imagined the whole thing? Some kind of stress-induced hallucination brought on by working too many late nights? But it had felt so real. The cold concrete under my feet, the echo of my footsteps, the sight of all those familiar objects in those impossible rooms. I finally drove home, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Sarah's jacket, Mike's coffee mug, Janet's reading glasses. The next morning, I made it a point to look for those specific items. Sarah was wearing a different blazer, and when I asked her about the navy blue one, she said she'd lost it somewhere in the building a few weeks ago. Mike was drinking from a different mug, claiming his usual one had mysteriously disappeared from his desk. Janet was squinting at her computer screen, complaining that she couldn't find her reading glasses anywhere. I never told anyone what I'd seen down there. Who would believe me? But I also never took that elevator alone again. I started using the stairs whenever possible, and when I absolutely had to use an elevator, I made sure there were other people with me. The thing is, I still work in that building, and sometimes late in the evening when most people have gone home, I'll be waiting for an elevator and I'll notice something strange. The floor indicator will flicker for just a moment, showing numbers that shouldn't exist. Negative floors that aren't supposed to be there. And I've started paying attention to the little things people lose. The personal items that just vanish from desks and break rooms and coat closets. A coffee mug here, a pair of gloves there, a pen that someone swore they just had 5 minutes ago. Small things that people assume they just misplaced. But I know better now. I know there's something below the basement level of our building. Something that shouldn't exist, in a place that defies every blueprint and building plan ever filed with the city. A sterile white hallway lined with rooms full of the lost pieces of our daily lives. I don't know what it is or why it's there. Maybe it's some kind of parallel space that exists alongside our normal world. Maybe it's a glitch in reality that the building was unlucky enough to be constructed on top of. Or maybe there's something more deliberate going on. Something that requires those personal objects for reasons I can't even begin to understand. All I know is that somewhere beneath my feet, in a place that elevator took me to but shouldn't have been able to reach, there's a collection of everything we've lost. And sometimes late at night when the building is empty and quiet, I wonder if I'll ever see that place again. Because part of me, despite how terrified I was, can't help but be curious about what else might be down there. What other rooms I didn't have time to explore. What other secrets that impossible hallway might be hiding. But mostly I just hope that whatever force controls that elevator decides it's taken enough from us already. Because I have a feeling that if I ever end up down there again, I might not be coming back up.